The mission briefing ended the same way it always did for Specialist Emma Rodriguez, with her name nowhere on the patrol roster. Captain Hayes closed his tactical folder and dismissed the squad leaders without a glance in her direction. She remained seated at the back of the briefing room, fingers drumming silently against her knee as the chosen soldiers filed out, their gear already heavy with the weight of real responsibility. Rodriguez. The captain's voice carried the practiced indifference of a man who'd already made his decision. Radio duty again. Staff Sergeant Williams needs backup on comms. He didn't wait for acknowledgement. There never was any question she'd comply. The door swung shut behind him, leaving Emma alone with the lingering scent of gun oil and the bitter taste of another missed opportunity. Through the window, she watched Alpha Squad loading their vehicles, their movements sharp with purpose she'd never been allowed to share. The pattern had held for 8 months now. Every mission brief, every operation order, every chance to prove herself, and every time the same result. Radio duty, supply runs, perimeter security. The assignments had kept her safely away from anything resembling real combat, despite her perfect scores at the firing range and tactical exercises that left seasoned soldiers shaking their heads. Staff Sergeant Williams barely looked up when she reported to the communications center, already accustomed to her predictable arrival. Before we continue this incredible story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to follow our channel and hit that like button if stories like this inspire you. And if you or anyone in your family has served in the military, we'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Your stories matter to us. But today felt different. As Emma settled into her position at the radio station, she noticed something the others had missed, a slight variation in the patrol route that would take Alpha Squad through a valley known for IED activity. Her fingers found a range card she'd memorized for every sector around the base, cross-referencing elevation data with known enemy positions. The math was troubling. If insurgents had established overwatch positions in the rocky outcroppings above the valley, Alpha Squad would be walking into a perfectly orchestrated kill zone. She reached for her headset, but Williams was already coordinating with other units. Some observations, she'd learned, were better kept to herself, at least for now. The radio crackled to life at 2:30 p.m. Alpha Squad's voices cutting through the desert heat like shards of glass. Base, this is Alpha 1. Moving through Checkpoint Bravo. All clear so far. Sergeant Martinez's voice carried the easy confidence of a man who'd walked these routes a dozen times before. Emma adjusted her headset and logged the transmission, her eyes automatically scanning the tactical display that showed their progress through the valley. Staff Sergeant Williams leaned back in his chair, half listening to routine check-ins while sorting through intelligence reports. But Emma's attention sharpened with each transmission. The intervals between check-ins were too regular, too predictable. Any enemy force monitoring their communications would have an exact timeline of Alpha Squad's movement. She pulled up the topographical maps on her screen, tracing their route with her finger, while calculating sight lines and engagement ranges from the surrounding ridgeline. Base Alpha 1. Approaching Checkpoint Charlie. Traffic moving normally on the main road. Martinez's voice again, steady and professional. Emma's jaw tightened. The main road intersection was the perfect choke point. Vehicles funneled into a narrow passage between two rocky outcroppings, with limited cover and nowhere to maneuver. If she were planning an ambush, that's exactly where she positioned her fighters. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up satellite imagery from the past 72 hours, looking for any signs of recent movement or disturbance in the elevated positions. Williams glanced over at her multiple screens and raised an eyebrow. Rodriguez, you writing a dissertation over there? Just log the transmissions. His tone carried mild amusement rather than irritation. He had grown accustomed to her thoroughness, even if he didn't understand it. Emma nodded and minimized the tactical displays, but her mind continued calculating distances and angles. 800 meters from the ridge to the road. Clear line of sight. Perfect elevation advantage for an enemy sniper. The next transmission came right on schedule. Base Alpha 1. Charlie checkpoint secure. Continuing to objective Delta. But this time, Emma heard something different in Martinez's voice, a subtle tension that wouldn't register with casual listeners. She'd studied voice stress analysis during her communications training, and Martinez's baseline vocal patterns had shifted. Her hand moved to the secondary radio channel, the one reserved for direct communication with the squad leaders. Sometimes the most important information came through what wasn't being said over the primary frequency. The explosion tore through the valley at 3:47 p.m., the sound reaching the base 3 seconds before the frantic radio transmission. Base! Base! This is Alpha 1. We're taking heavy fire. IED strike on lead vehicle. Multiple casualties. Martinez's voice cracked through the static, all professional composure shattered by the chaos of combat. Emma's hands flew across the radio controls, instantly switching to the emergency frequency, while Williams scrambled for the command phone. Alpha 1, this is base. Report your status and position. Williams barked into his headset, but the response was a wall of gunfire punctuated by shouted orders and screams. Emma was already pulling up the drone feed on her secondary monitor, her fingers dancing across multiple keyboards with practiced precision. The grainy black and white image showed Alpha Squad's vehicles stopped in the exact choke point she'd identified. One Humvee burning. Soldiers scattered behind inadequate cover, muzzle flashes winking from the rocky outcroppings like deadly stars. We got shooters on the ridge. Estimate 4 to 6 combatants. Can't get clear shots from this angle. Martinez's transmission dissolved into static as another explosion rocked the valley. Emma counted the muzzle flashes on her screen. 6 confirmed positions. Perfectly coordinated fields of fire that had Alpha Squad pinned down with no escape route. The tactical situation was a textbook example of a well-executed ambush, and without immediate intervention, it would become a massacre. Williams was shouting into the command phone, trying to coordinate a rescue mission, but Emma knew the mathematics of combat. By the time reinforcements could mount up and reach the valley, Alpha Squad would be overrun. The enemy positions were too well concealed for effective return fire from the valley floor, and the burning vehicle blocked any possibility of retreat. She grabbed her M110 sniper rifle from the weapon rack, checking the scope settings with movements that were purely instinctive. Rodriguez, what the hell are you doing? Williams looked up from his frantic coordination efforts, his face flushed with stress and confusion. Emma was already strapping on her gear, her movements economical and purposeful. Those positions are at the maximum effective range for our weapons. Someone needs to get elevation and take them out before Alpha Squad gets wiped out. She didn't wait for permission. There wasn't time for the luxury of proper authorization. The door to the communications center slammed behind her as she sprinted toward the base's observation tower, her rifle cutting through the desert air like a promise of retribution. Emma reached the observation tower's top platform in 43 seconds, her breathing controlled despite the 3-story climb. The elevated position provided a clear line of sight to the ambush site, 820 meters away according to her rangefinder. She dropped into a prone position behind a concrete barrier, her rifle's bipod locking into place with a metallic click that sounded like destiny finding its mark. Through her scope, the enemy positions materialized with crystalline clarity. Muzzle flashes that seemed random from the drone feed now revealed themselves as a coordinated killing machine. The first target appeared in her crosshairs at 15:52 hours. An insurgent fighter, partially concealed behind a boulder, his AK-47 spitting fire down into the trapped patrol. Emma's breathing slowed to match her heartbeat, her finger finding the trigger with the familiarity of a pianist touching keys. She didn't think about the wind speed, the bullet drop, or the atmospheric conditions. Her body had internalized these calculations through thousands of hours of practice that no one at the base had ever witnessed. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, and 800 meters away, the muzzle flash stopped forever. Base, this is Alpha 1. Sniper fire. One of the ridge shooters just went down. Martinez's voice carried a note of desperate hope, but Emma was already acquiring her second target. The enemy fighters were good. They immediately began shifting positions, realizing they were being hunted from an unexpected angle. But Emma had studied their movement patterns during the first chaotic minutes of the ambush, and she understood how trained fighters react under pressure. Her second shot took down a militant trying to relocate to better cover, the bullet finding its mark before he could complete his tactical displacement. Williams' voice exploded through a radio earpiece. Rodriguez, what's your status up there? But Emma couldn't spare attention for a radio protocol. Target 3 was the most dangerous, a fighter with an RPG who was lining up a shot on Alpha Squad's remaining vehicles. Her scope settled on center mass, and she squeezed the trigger with the methodical precision of a surgeon removing a tumor. The RPG round went wide, exploding harmlessly against a valley wall as its operator crumpled behind his firing position. 3 shots, 3 confirmed kills. The remaining insurgents were now suppressed, their coordinated fire broken by the sudden appearance of a precision shooter they couldn't locate or engage. Emma's radio crackled with frantic transmissions from the valley floor, but she was already scanning for targets 4 through 6. Her rifle had become an extension of her will, each shot a mathematical equation solved with lethal accuracy. The overlooked specialist who'd spent 8 months on radio duty was finally getting her chance to demonstrate what she'd been training for her entire military career, and Alpha Squad was about to learn why some soldiers are kept in reserve until the moment when only perfection will suffice. The 4th target fell at 3:55 p.m., but Emma's scope had already found something that made her blood freeze in her veins. Through the magnified optics, she could see what the drone cameras had missed. A 7th insurgent, positioned in a concealed spider hole, aiming not at Alpha Squad, but directly at the base's main gate. The tactical picture suddenly snapped into focus with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a coordinated attack designed to draw the base's reaction force into a secondary kill zone. Her radio crackled with confirmation. All units. Enemy contact at main gate. We're taking fire from multiple positions. Emma's training kicked into overdrive, her mind processing the battlefield geometry with the speed of a tactical computer. The gate attack was perfectly timed, designed to begin just as the base's quick reaction force departed to rescue Alpha Squad, leaving the installation vulnerable. But the sniper in the spider hole had made one critical error. He was within her engagement range. She adjusted her scope for the new distance, 640 meters, and controlled her breathing as explosions erupted around the base perimeter. Her finger found the trigger, and the distant muzzle flash winked out of existence. Holy shit, Rodriguez. Williams' voice cut through the radio chatter, his usual professional demeanor shattered by what he was witnessing through the command center surveillance feeds. How many is that? But Emma was already acquiring Target 6, a fighter who was attempting to maneuver toward Alpha Squad's flank. The shot was more difficult, a moving target partially concealed by terrain features, but her crosshairs tracked the insurgent's movement with predatory patience. When he paused to take aim, she squeezed the trigger. The figure dropped behind a boulder and didn't reappear. The silence that followed was more deafening than the gunfire had been. Emma remained in position, scanning the ridgeline through her scope, waiting for any sign of remaining threats. Her radio came alive with transmissions from Alpha Squad. Base, this is Alpha 1. Hostile fire has ceased. We're moving to extract casualties. Martinez's voice carried a note of bewildered gratitude that hadn't been there before. On the base perimeter, the gate attack had also gone quiet, the coordination between enemy forces broken by the elimination of their overwatch positions. Staff Sergeant Williams reached the observation tower 6 minutes later, his face flushed from the climb, and his expression a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension. He found Emma methodically cleaning her rifle, her movements precise and professional. Rodriguez, he said quietly, where the hell did you learn to shoot like that? Emma looked up from her weapon maintenance, her eyes carrying the calm confidence of someone who had finally been allowed to do what she was born for. Quantico Marine Scout Sniper School, Staff Sergeant, Honor Graduate, Class of 2019. My father thought I should have a backup plan if the Army didn't work out. The pieces of an 8-month puzzle suddenly clicked into place in William's mind, and he understood why Specialist Emma Rodriguez had never complained about radio duty. She'd been waiting for the moment when the base would need a guardian angel with a rifle. The after-action briefing convened at 7:30 p.m. hours in the main conference room, every seat filled with personnel who had witnessed or participated in the day's events. Captain Hayes stood at the front of the room, his tactical folder replaced by a detailed engagement report that bore Emma's name on every critical page. The atmosphere was different from the morning's routine briefing. charged with the electricity that follows combat, when the theoretical becomes devastatingly real, and every decision carries the weight of lives saved or lost. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Hayes began, his voice carrying a gravity that commanded absolute attention. Today's engagement resulted in 0 friendly casualties, despite a coordinated enemy attack designed to inflict maximum damage on our forces. He clicked to the first slide of his presentation, showing the tactical overview of both ambush sites. This outcome was achieved through the actions of one soldier who identified the threat, positioned herself to engage multiple targets at extended range, and eliminated 7 enemy combatants with 7 shots. The room remained silent, but Emma could feel every pair of eyes turning toward her position at the back of the room. Staff Sergeant Williams stood to address the assembled personnel, his earlier shock replaced by professional admiration. Specialist Rodriguez demonstrated exceptional marksmanship under combat conditions, engaging targets at ranges exceeding 800 meters while coordinating fire support for a pinned-down patrol. He paused, consulting his notes with deliberate precision. Her actions directly prevented casualties of Alpha Squad and disrupted a coordinated attack on our base perimeter. What some of you may not know is that Specialist Rodriguez is a graduate of Marine Scout Sniper School and holds expert marksman qualifications that exceed standard Army requirements. The revelation rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Sergeant Martinez, his arm in a sling from the day's engagement, spoke up from his seat in the front row. "Ma'am, why didn't anyone know about your sniper qualification?" Emma stood to respond, her voice steady and professional. "It never came up in normal duty assignments, Sergeant. I was trained to follow orders and complete whatever mission I was given." Her answer carried no trace of bitterness, only the quiet confidence of a soldier who had proven her worth when it mattered most. Captain Hayes concluded the briefing with an announcement that transformed 8 months of overlooked potential into formal recognition. Effective immediately, Specialist Rodriguez will be assigned to our designated marksman position, with additional duties as our primary long-range reconnaissance specialist. Her performance today has demonstrated capabilities that our unit needs to maximize. As the personnel filed out of the briefing room, the conversations carried a different tone than the morning's casual dismissals. Emma remained in her seat, cleaning her glasses with the same methodical precision she'd used to clean her rifle. Staff Sergeant Williams approached her as the room emptied, extending his hand with respect that hadn't existed 12 hours earlier. "Rodriguez, I owe you an apology. We all do." Emma shook his hand firmly, her response carrying the wisdom of someone who understood that true soldiers are measured by their actions under fire, not their assignments during peacetime. "No apology necessary, Staff Sergeant. I was just doing my job, the job I've been training for my whole career. Today was the first time anyone needed me to do it. The radio duty days were over, but Emma Rodriguez had never really been overlooked. She'd been held in reserve until the moment when only perfection would be enough to bring everyone home alive.